Welcome in Wednesday afternoon. Here we go. Megan, we are back at another Wednesday edition of the DNVR Avalanche Podcast. Jesse Montano, Meghan Angley, Yaya running the board for us today. We're getting into the off season. We are going to go with a Q&A for the third segment today. We reached out for some questions, and as always, you guys responded in droves. But we got plenty else to get into. Megan, first of all, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Yeah, I'm doing well. I got my patio put back together. We power washed it and all that stuff. So for like 2 weeks, just all of our stuff was just like piled into, a certain corner of it. And I got it put back together yesterday, sat outside, enjoyed it. And so
that's excellent.
I'm feeling very, put together because my backyard isn't destroyed.
Yeah, was that after a lot of that flooding, hail, tornado?
Yeah, well, so just this winter, between the snow and the ice and everything and the rain, it had just gotten so beat up that we decided we needed to get out the power washer, get everything cleaned off, all that stuff. And then we had it. Well, I didn't get it fully done right away because of all the rain and all that stuff. So we finally had those nice couple days, back to back last week where we got it fully knocked out. And now we were put back together. So my answer is I feel put back together.
That's awesome. Just like the furniture.
Just like the furniture. Megan, some significant news. Was it officially yesterday, I believe? Patrice Bergeron announces his retirement from the NHL. This was something that was on everybody's radar for the last couple of seasons, if he was going to play again or not. He does decide to hang them up. I mean, such a funny, like sneaky all-time great. Where, I mean, like when you just list off like, oh, these are some of the greatest players of all time, I don't think Patrice Bergeron necessarily comes to a lot of people's mind, but he absolutely should for the way he played the game. 427 goals, 1,040 points, 6 Selke Trophy wins, including 12 straight finalist nominations, 14 consecutive years where he was a top 5 finisher for the Selke Trophy, and of course, one-time Stanley Cup champion. I mean, just an unbelievable career.
It's everything about not only his approach to the game, but how he carried himself off ice, the class and professionalism that I think he added to the culture of hockey. I think there are a lot of players who admired him for this quality, sought to be more like him because of it, and had a big influence on younger players for this reason. And it's why I'm really sad to hear the news, because I've always felt the league is better with a player like Bergeron in it. And I am going to miss what he brought to the game as well, though. It's a funny thing to talk about the Selke Trophy, because that's an award that a lot of players just probably counted themselves out of the running year by year, because a person like Patrice Bergeron and the Ryan O'Reillys of the world, as long as they're still in the league, that's just not going to be your trophy. And the two-way game that he played, I think, has become a necessity of today's forward. You have to play this way, especially if you're going to be a player that is counted on not only for leadership abilities, but utilized in every situation on the ice. And that's what Bergeron was to the Bruins. I think that it's hard to see a franchise player like that hang up the skates.
There's a lot of NHLers who refer to him as the perfect player because of how good he was in his own end. But again, more than 1,000 points in his career. You mentioned Ryan O'Reilly there. With Patrice Bergeron, and what's so funny is as elite of a defensive forward as Ryan O'Reilly has been in his career, it is the consistency of Patrice Bergeron that is really the thing for him that just kind of takes it over the top. I mean, you look at his analytical and pure statistic numbers from 10 years ago relative to what they were this last year. And I mean, he got better as his career aged. And again, you pointed out the leadership qualities. That is one of the things about him is he is such a good leader off the ice as well as in game situations, things like that, but really commanded that Boston locker room and was a huge part of the reason why they were so relevant they won the Stanley Cup in 2011, and last season they broke the NHL wins record for the regular season. And so much that has run through Patrice Bergeron.
100%. I think that's what makes it tough, too, is their window was largely because of Bergeron being there in this last season. And they have a huge problem now down the middle in Boston, and this isn't to take away from Bergeron for a second.
No,
too much
but
either,
it's almost
the
like
future of that compete window.
Right. It's the underscore on how much he meant to that team.
Exactly. It was sort of this, it's now or never.
Mm-hmm.
And it was for Bergeron, too. A lot of it was, this is going to be probably his last go-round. And so that is another component that makes it a bit sad. But a lot of people have talked about it on Twitter. One thing that stood out to me so much about Bergeron that I wanted to talk about was having his entire locker room watch the Kyle Beach interview and discuss it to make sure as a team that something like that didn't happen. And I think opening those lines of communication in hockey is so important to being a better support system for one another. And that just is the kind of guy he is. And well, it's like, they don't make him like that.
I'll take it a step further, not just hockey, but just like anywhere where you have a team, a group, an organization, anything like that, having leaders like that is rare. Unfortunately rare, because, you those are the kind of people that you want at the helm, taking charge of people. And again, not shying away, using the Kyle Beach thing, not shying away, not scolding anybody, but taking that as an opportunity to educate everybody. And we aren't going to have this happen here, stuff like this happen here, and not be afraid of what people are going to think that he did that, what our teammates going to say, kind of being true to who he believes that he needs to be. And yeah, Patrice Bergeron, like I said, if you go watch his YouTube highlights, it's not going to be the flashiest 10 minutes worth of clips, but just an unbelievable career. And one of the things that I want to talk about just a little bit here is this really is, the NHL is getting really close to turning a very specific page here, with Patrice Bergeron and Craig Anderson early in the summer, both retiring. That leaves just 3 players left active in the NHL that played in the league prior to the 2004-2005 lockout. Brent Burns, Marc-Andre Fleury, and Eric Stahl. So, I mean, we really are, Megan, getting close to this being it's an entirely new generation of players.
Wow. Is that really what it's down to?
Yep.
Is Kopitar not a part of that?
Nope. He didn't play in the NHL before the lockout.
Wow. That's a lot.
So, I mean, it's again, we talked, Megan, I don't remember what it was, 2-3 weeks ago, about like the prospect of guys like, when Crosby and Ovechkin retire in a few years, how that's going to be a crazy, just like, wow, we watched their entire career unfold. Bergeron's also in that same realm. Like, again, the 2011 Stanley Cup, he was still in the front half of his career, young, exciting. Zdeno Chara was there as the captain. And now we've watched him go through this entire career, this, illustrious, all the awards, the Selkies, the points, all that stuff. And now he's done. And like, he's no longer a part of the Boston Bruins organization, at least in a player capacity. And it's just kind of hard to wrap your head around. I could tell when I told you that stat, I could see happening in your eyes what happened in my head 2 days ago when someone pointed that out to me. I was like, holy smokes.
I was also multitasking. I was trying to remember the name of the player that the Boston Bruins drafted, Mitch Miller it was, that had the controversial history in like high school age.
Yeah.
I believe Bergeron was another one of the players from Boston who came forward and spoke on it.
I was going to say like, one of several. That was what was such a bad thing about that. Is it's like, yo, you don't even need your strong leader to do this. Everybody in this room is like, what the F are you doing? Yeah. Led by him.
And that's why I wanted to like, oh man, this is just who he is as a person. And it has an influence on the whole group because several people also felt similarly. But anyways, that was a sidetrack. And I'm also processing how few players remain from the lockout era that you just mentioned. And so
do you want to know what's even crazier?
It's been whittled down so much.
What a high level Patrice Bergeron was able to play at last year.
Yes.
And like how impactful Brent Burns still is. Like it didn't really occur to me. Sorry, Brent Burns, if on the 0.05% chance you're listening to this, I didn't realize how old Brent Burns was.
How old is Brent Burns?
Well, he's old enough to have played before the 2005 lockout.
That's, you know what? It is funny. He doesn't seem younger than Kopitar in my eyes, which maybe is mean towards Kopitar.
I was going to say
38 years old.
Yeah, I don't know. So it's just, it is crazy. And again, on the same day that our good friend Craig Morgan is reporting that, well, hold on here, maybe Logan Cooley is going to leave the University of Minnesota to come into the NHL. Obviously you got Connor Bedard, the kid, I can't remember his name now off the top of my head, the Calgary kid who we ran into getting pizza the night after round 1 signed his ELC today. I just saw it too. It starts with an M. It doesn't matter. But again, just as you're seeing this entire new wave, and we talk so much about how the league is changing and how you need to embrace younger players and the way that contracts are negotiated is different, and the trades and free. We talk about so much of that, and it's instances like Patrice Bergeron retiring that make you kind of pause and say, "Whoa, there's a generation of players here that are hanging them up that played a huge role in getting the NHL back to where it is, stronger than it ever was before that 2005 lockout. After it, it took a serious hit for a few years, and it's players like Patrice Bergeron that helped get it to this point that we're now hoping the next young crop can continue to push forward."
It's interesting because, like you said, I think that he went out in a fashion that he would be happy with. He wasn't, hanging on by a thread. He still was playing good hockey.
Yeah.
And it's funny too, because it's like, I don't even think this generation coming up necessarily grew up loving Patrice Bergeron. I think a lot of players that are currently in the league, in that locker room, grew up watching Patrice Bergeron, to put it into perspective. Like, I think the generation coming up are dropping names like Nathan MacKinnon at this point because of the age gap. And I think so many still admire Bergeron, though, for the qualities that he brought.
Well, it's
both on and off the
Hanzik is his name. Thank you. The Calgary kid.
But where I was going with this is, actually, I lost my train of thought. That distracted
No,
me.
I'm sorry. That was my fault. Was it you're talking about the players in the league were the ones who watched and emulated and idolized Patrice Bergeron? This next young crop, probably the gauge gap is too big.
Yeah, there was a different thought I was going with that.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
But you're right. I think there's a lot of big names currently in the NHL who modeled, attempted to model their game after Bergeron, the way he conducted himself, the way he was a total pro around the rink, things like that. Let's kind of wrap this up. Now that Patrice Bergeron has retired, we have those 3 names that we just listed: Marc-Andre Fleury, Brent Burns, and Eric Stahl. Who do you think will be the last? Of the pre-lockout era, who do you think will be the last man standing? Brent Burns, Marc-Andre Fleury, Eric Stahl.
It feels like Fleury, but not in a starting capacity, just because of the longevity of goalies.
Okay.
I feel like he can hang around and maybe bounce down to like a third string capacity, kind of how we're seeing Jonathan Quick, the window that he's in. So that's where I'm guessing.
All right. But I like that. Yeah. With all due respect to Eric Stahl, it's not him. It's one of the other 2.
I like that take. It's definitely not this guy.
I can tell you who it's not, and that's Eric Stahl. He already half retired once. DNVR Avalanche Podcast, Wednesday edition here. Jesse and Megan, we are brought to you guys by Pins and Aces. Got my Pins and Aces shirt on today. The official golf apparel partner of ALLCITY and DNVR. We love our Pins and Aces gear, and I really do. I have this, and then I have the other one that I wore to that our kind of Avs Media summer gathering, and everyone gets a lot of compliments whenever they wear Pins and Aces stuff. I think everybody at that event said something about the shirt, and I was like, I can't get any credit for it. It's all them. So they're family-owned golf and apparel business based right here in Colorado. They make amazing polos, hats, golf bags, and even our favorite beer sleeve, an innovative product that allows you to store 7 beers right inside your golf bag and keeps drinks cold the entire round. Head to pinsandaces.com, pinsandaces.com, and use code DNVR to receive 15% off your first order and get free shipping. Again, pinsandaces.com. Also brought to you guys by one of our newer partners, Bet365. Use code DNVR365 when you sign up. They pioneered live sports betting, live in-game betting, and today Bet365 offers the widest range of games and markets available for live in-game betting. They have over 80 million users worldwide, and Bet365 streams over 780,000 events each year, and they are a proud partner of the Colorado Rockies. Megan and I talked about it last week. One of my favorite things about, now that we've gotten the Bet365 app, we've been able to click around it a bit. Because they're so big in Europe for so long before they came over to the United States, they do have a lot of those kind of like niche Euro leagues for soccer, for hockey, for basketball, things like that. So there's literally things you can bet on 24/7, 365. Yeah, sorry. Turn $1 into $200 worth of bonus bets when you join Bet365. Download the app, deposit $10, and claim your $200 in bonus bets as soon as you place a bet for $1. Download the Bet365 app, and again, use the code DNVR365 when you sign up. Must be 21 or older and physically located in Colorado. Please gamble responsibly. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. And
you can also bet on the Women's World Cup tonight.
Ooh, there you go. Yep.
That's what I'm betting on.
Great call out.
Women's World Cup tonight.
I'm making a bunch of money on Colorado girlies that are like,
yeah.
I really am, dude. Like last game we had a Colorado hat trick. Only Colorado players scored for the U.S. last time.
Nice.
So
That's amazing. Is
Sounds
that
about
something
right.
you can bet on too?
I don't think you can
Like
bet if
Colorado
it's only Colorado based.
Okay.
But I just gamble on if you're from Colorado, I'm all the
You're
way
putting
in.
okay.
Yeah. So you're betting is like an anytime goal scorer type thing.
Exactly.
Okay,
And honestly, like if you bet on those two, you're betting on two of the maybe top 3 players in that team, which is already the best team in the world. So it's like kind of guaranteed that you're gonna make some money.
There you go. Download the Bet365 app. Use that code DNVR365 and take Yaya's absolute guarantee if for the U.S. Women's World Cup tonight. Yeah. Speaking of Bet365, it's time for this week's Bet365 Top 5. Megan, I took the list a couple weeks ago, so I turned it over to you for this. I don't even know what the list is.
I'm so
I don't know
excited.
what this is a list of. I don't know who's ranked in. I have no idea what any of this is, so I can't wait to get into it. I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. So it's top players who've played for Colorado who played college hockey.
Oh, all right. Okay, yeah. See, I was just wondering all night. I said, I wonder what is she gonna do? I thought it was gonna be something Eagles or whatever, but I like this one. This
It's
is
a
good
college hockey one, and I'm excited because we can get into the conversation about honorable mentions here as well. But the overall takeaway in this top 5 is that there are many players who've played for Colorado who also had a college hockey background. Some with a pretty good college hockey background, spent 4 years in college before making the leap to the next level. Feel like it's really appropriate too, given how many chances they've taken on some of these college free agent players in hopes that they're going to turn out to be something. There's a pretty storied history now with the Avs and college players. So my number 5, is that how we're going to do it? I'll just reveal it. Okay, this is an interesting one just compared to who else is in this list for consideration, but it is Erik Johnson.
That's a great one.
And it's interesting because when you think about it, he's the longest tenured Av. So it's
I was
like,
gonna say,
wow, he might belong higher.
I
in this
cannot
list.
wait through 4 through 1 if you've got EJ at 5. Yeah, no, that's a great one.
University of Minnesota guy, 1 season there though. So that's where in the scheme of things, I wasn't sure how much to put it. But so one of the recurring themes in this list is a Stanley Cup. Erik Johnson is a Stanley Cup champion, and he grew up, in my opinion, as a player with the Avs. I think he really stepped into the Erik Johnson, like he reached his peak through Colorado, had some of his most productive years here, and then obviously became such an important voice in the locker room. He's absolutely an important Av who played college hockey. Yeah,
no, for sure. I like your point of he kind of grew up with the Avs. I've said it a million times now. I really do think the best hockey he played in Colorado was in the 2022 Stanley Cup run. So, I mean, how do you cap off the growth more than that? I like that pick a lot. And it's so funny. I forget all the time that he played college hockey because he only played there the 1 year. He was the first overall. And you hear about when he was with the U.S. National Development Team program, all that stuff. You forget that he was a Golden Gopher.
All right, my number 4 is Chris Drury, who people may or may not have known played at BU. He was actually their captain, a Hobey Baker winner, won a Calder in Colorado.
Wait, played where?
BU.
I thought you said DU.
Oh,
I was
no.
like, I'm almost positive that's not correct.
Boston University.
Okay, all right. Yeah.
So he actually is one that had quite a route to college hockey and being their captain, being a Hobey Baker winner. But then, of course, his impact in Colorado is obvious. He's a Calder winner.
Totally.
He, 4 seasons with Avs, 4 seasons with BU, won a cup, let's see, 16 points in 23 games is what I had written down for that cup run specifically.
Yeah, he was outstanding.
Came to be known as a clutch player in Colorado. Honestly, there was an argument to be made for him to possibly be a little bit higher in this list because of how clutch he was in Colorado in their postseason play, not only in the cup winning year, but in other playoff runs beyond that.
Yeah, no, he was great. There's memories I have specifically of him. Game 5 of the 2001 Stanley Cup final, he scores that third goal that kind of, put that one away. Game 6, not Game 5. Kind of put that one away to help send the Avs back for Game 7. He was great for the Avs, and he's one of the players that's long considered to be one of the top 2 worst trades the Avs ever made was getting rid of Chris Drury, and I probably agree with that for a lot of the reasons you just listed. All
right, I'm excited for number 3 because it's a conditional number 3. Ooh. And it's Devon Toews out of Quinnipiac. And
I love it.
It's here's why though. You're gonna hear number 2 and you're like, interesting, because Devon Toews is in this next season up for the number 2 spot. Okay. Just based on what he does this next season, because he is just 1 year behind who I have at number 2 in terms of his time here in Colorado. So he was 3 years at Quinnipiac, and then he's entering his 4th season with the Avs. Obviously, he's a Stanley Cup champion, and I think Cale Makar is elite in his own right, but I think so much of the success they have had has been because of them playing alongside one another. And Devon Toews not only has a chance at another cup in Colorado this next season, he has a chance to emerge as an even bigger voice in their leadership group. That I put him at 3, but he could very, very easily be number 2 based on what happens this next season.
The definition of, the truest definition of a late bloomer, Devon Toews, playing 3 years for high impact players. I feel like that's uncommon to have such a long college career and then be able to be a truly elite player at the NHL level. Usually that, correlates with, they stayed in college for 3-4 years because they weren't quite ready. They can contribute. He is the exact opposite of that. Stayed for a long time and is a bona fide top 10 defenseman in the NHL.
That's what makes me excited about the direction players who play in college and go to the NHL is trending, because oftentimes you see programs that have a high rate of players turning pro, leaving the program after 1 to 2 years.
Exactly, yeah.
And so it's hard for programs to sustain success when their NHL caliber players are moving on to the NHL. So it is interesting to see players like Devon Toews carve out a very successful NHL career, and they took their way through the college route. They didn't take any shortcuts, basically. And I think that's going to be true of a lot of players that we're seeing come from college and make the transition to the NHL. Another one that is kind of in a similar vein, but from perhaps a different era, is my number 2. And it's Rob Blake. He played at Bowling Green.
What?
Which people may not have known. And I want to say,
know that.
3 seasons at Bowling Green. Another one that had a pretty healthy college career before an NHL career. And he is in a lot of ways similar to Chris Drury in terms of what he meant to that cup run specifically. Immediately a high impact player following the trade to Colorado. And I just thought he brought a lot to the table that Avs look for in their defensemen now, merging the physicality of the game with also being a productive player, having a potent shot. And he spent 4 additional seasons after he won the cup here in Colorado as an alternate captain. And so that leadership component is what gave him the slight edge over Drury in this overall, but is also why Toews is right in line to take the number 2 spot instead of Rob Blake.
Well, and having Rob Blake ahead of... Now knowing it's Rob Blake ahead of Devon Toews, I think makes a ton of sense. He's one of the league's all-time great defensemen. Like you said, was really one of the first players that I remembered. I played defense from the time I was 5 years old. And he was someone that, obviously I didn't quite have the size that Rob Blake does, but he was someone that I remember watching as a kid saying, this is someone who mixes the physicality, strong defenseman, but having offensive upside and having the shot, being a threat from the point. I think that's a great pick. I had no idea he was going to be on this list because I didn't know he played NCAA. I think that's a great pick at number
And
2.
I love it too because there are some players from programs that maybe don't carry the same weight of like Michigan, and Bowling Green is one of them. Exciting to see that player come from it. For example, did you know Ross Colton played college hockey?
I did, only because we've talked a ton about him this summer,
fair.
but I didn't before.
And that's where this becomes interesting too, is Miles Wood and Ross Colton, both players who played college hockey. Can they have an impact on this Colorado team? A lot of other college players have before them. I think the number 1 spot though is
I was gonna say, I
so
wonder
easy
who
to
it
guess.
is.
And it's Cale Makar. It's for it's Taylor Makar.
Yeah.
It's so obvious. It doesn't require very much explanation because of what he's going to mean to this franchise beyond what he's already done for the Colorado Avalanche.
Well, and I do think the other thing here that, if you're talking about college, players that played in college, I struggle to think of any current NHLer that had the effect on a college program, a junior program, anything, the way that Cale Makar did for, UMass. I mean, I remember when the Avs drafted him, we were all concerned that he was going to UMass. It's like, you're going to trust this 4th overall pick who's already coming from kind of an unproven league. You're going to send him to this terrible program where they're just going to get their heads kicked in for a year before he comes to the NHL. And, I mean, him and Greg Carvel, completely turned that program around to their national champions just 3 years later. Cale Makar's not a part of that, but none of that happens if Cale Makar doesn't go there. So what he meant to that organization, let alone what he means to this one, I said it to you last week. Whenever Gabe Landeskog retires, 10 years from now, 10 months from now, 5 years, whatever it is, Cale Makar will be the next captain of the Colorado Avalanche. I think he will be the one to carry that torch forward. So, he's the no-brainer pick. Would you like to know something that I've taken away from your list here?
What?
We hear a lot about major, junior, and the QMJHL. It's scoring. These are young kids. They leave home early. You have some exceptional status kids, 15, 16, 17 years old. What so many people talk about college is you get to play against older, bigger, stronger players. I still do think that, pound for pound, I think the skill level is still probably higher in the CHL. But you have 4 of your 5 are defensemen. And these are all players that you can easily draw the line that benefited from playing against a heavier competition, older, grown men. There's some men that are playing the NCAA right now because of the COVID year, 23, 24 years old. It makes a difference for what is typically a slower development path for defensemen. I think you're starting to see a clear correlation here, just using your small sample size of 5, 4 of your top 5 most impactful players, which I think that's a great list, are defensemen. And I think I think you can draw a pretty easy parallel there.
I think the point about physical maturity and the trajectory for defensemen to become more pro-ready and needing to physically mature is an important call-out, because this is what we see with players generally taking kind of the longer route before they get to the pro league. Sometimes they don't have another option, but they're able to more physically mature before they're being dropped into the American League. And I think we see guys straight from major junior go into the American League, kind of smaller sized, and they get beat up a little bit by the physicality of the game coupled with the pace. And this is why defensemen from college, I worry about that transition in the immediate the most, because it is such a stark contrast. Even Cale Makar coming straight from college and being dropped into Avs games, the success that he had was so impressive to me. That's how I don't know when it clicked for you that we had a star on our hands, but seeing how quickly he made that transition from NCAA to pro level is it's such a difficult transition to make because of what we're describing and the difference in pace, but also the size of players.
Well, and it really speaks again to, and I will openly admit it, it's maybe my worst take of all time. I was very critical of Cale Makar when he decided to go back for a second year. I was saying, why are you doing this? You're a top 5 pick. Come, get into pro hockey, start getting pro coaching, start, whatever. But he understood playing 1 year, I need to get on this level of physicality before I can even think about going to the next one. And he worked on his game and he refined it to the point where he dominated the NCAA in his sophomore season. Dominated. stepped his physicality up. And I think that second season is a huge reason why. And again, Cale Makar is an anomaly of a human just in general, but that's why he was able to step right in so efficiently. I will never forget. I was in the building when he scored that first goal against Calgary. Happened right in front of me. And just, it's that moment you're sitting there, you're like, holy smokes, this kid's a superstar. He can make this adjustment. He did what he felt was best for him by going to college. And then he did what he thought was best for him by staying in college. And how can you argue with any of the results?
Absolutely. The call out about defensemen is interesting too, because one of my honorable mentions is John Michael Liles from Michigan State, because he spent such a long time with the Avs through 7 seasons and was one of the most consistently productive players. And that consistency, I think, is complemented by the routine and regimen that a college pathway really supports, because they have to adopt a pretty strict routine in terms of not only what they bring to the table through athletics, but also through academics. And it's just an interesting one for John Michael Liles to be yet another defenseman kind of in this list. Another mention is Paul Stastny from DU, because I couldn't just not throw that in there.
I couldn't believe you didn't have a single DU guy on your list.
I couldn't when you see who ended up on it.
There's
There's so many reasons.
That's
to
me
make
just
a
giving you
case
shit a little bit.
for Stastny, like 8 seasons as an Av and an alternate captain for 6 of those seasons. Like Paul Stastny had a big impact in Colorado.
It's just tough because he was here during some of the real lean years. And that's what separates a guy like Eric Johnson is, especially now we learned from his radio hit a few weeks ago, he actually flexed his no trade clause twice to stay here and eventually be part of the, the Stanley Cup championship team. Not that I'm not like dogging Paul Stastny for walking in free agency, but it's those types of things that, hey, how can you argue these are 5 players that won Stanley Cups with the Avalanche?
Others, Logan O'Connor, JT Compher, hard not to make mention of because they are part of a 2022 Cup winning team.
But again, just going back to this, now my gears are just turning on this, defenseman going the college route. I mean, like, I can think of a lot of Avalanche players in history, forwards, who played college and had a good career. But, like, it feels like a lot of obviously there's been a lot of defensemen that have played for the Avs, but a lot of like the real high impact ones went this route. And Bowen Byram has obviously dealt with, crazy injury issues and things like that. But you do wonder, there's a kid that's making the jump from major junior to the NHL. Would he have benefited from? Now I know he played CHL, so he wasn't eligible to play, college, but is this going to start to be a trend? Hey, if you're a defenseman, play USHL, then go get a year or 2 of college. I think that is the route myself personally. I think it's good to have a mix of both.
Nice.
A mix of both, playing against the really high-end skill and talent of major junior, but then getting some of that physical maturity, that bigger, heavier hockey. The one thing that I do worry about with college players at times, and I think we saw this with Alex Newhook his rookie year, and I specifically remember talking to Alex Kerfoot about it, they don't play a lot of games.
Yes.
And that is the one thing that I really do think is the jump, the hardest part of the jump for players going from college to NHL is you just run out of gas because you are not used to playing as much as they play at the NHL level, and you get close to that at the junior level. I think they play 60, 65 games. If you go on to the Memorial Cup, you're pushing 75 plus. That is my one real drawback when I take a large step back and look at your list and how they've impacted. The only thing that I would say I don't like about players going that route is how few games they play. But if that's your only complaint,
it's a hard part of the transition too. The players admit as much. Even players who have a high motor still find that schedule to be rigorous, especially jumping from their college season into the pro league. Sam Malinsky's debut into the American League was road game series, game after game after game, traveling up the coast in California. And that was probably a really rough transition from previously having games just on the weekends some of the time.
Right. And just, the practice schedules and things like that. Like you said, you have to mix it all with class. I feel like it could be, if you haven't gone that, USHL route or something like that to begin with, the null, whatever. I feel like that could be a little bit of a culture shock, making that leap, like you said, with the weekends.
I love the news that gets announced.
I know. We're going to get into it here in a second. I'm trying to get a little bit more details. But we'll talk about it here in just a second. Ben Meyeres has signed his extension. We are trying to get some details on AAV and things like that.
Former college hockey player Ben Meyeres signs.
Right. Yeah, so while we wait to maybe hear back on that, anything else on your top 5? I think that's a great list, Megan.
We've beat the college hockey conversation to death.
No. I mean, because it again, I wasn't even going to go down that road. I was going to finish up the list, be like, nice. But when I looked at the makeup of it, I thought it inadvertently made an interesting point that
that's lower AAV than I was expecting.
Jesus. I didn't even realize that was an AAV. I thought Avery accidentally dropped her hand on her keyboard. Perfect. All right. Well, there we go. Peter Baugh. Peter Baugh, sick at home. Otherwise, he would have been on the show to break the news. We tried to get Peter on this week. Ben Meyeres, there it is. 1 year, $775. The Avs had extended him a qualifying offer. Initially, hadn't signed it. We were kind of wondering what was going on, what was going to end up being the outcome of all of this. People were starting to wonder, does he not want to be here? We knew that wasn't the case. We knew it was going to get done. I'm with you. The 775 is lower than what I thought it was going to be, given how long this all went on. But before we get in there to all of that, and we're going to answer some questions, I want to remind you guys, we are brought to you guys by Backus and Schenker. They win for Colorado families. They've been doing it for over 25 years. No upfront fee to speak about your case. No fee while they work on your case. You don't pay until they win for you. Backus and Schenker has won over $1 billion for their clients here in Colorado. They now have even more locations so they can serve all Coloradans more efficiently. They have offices in Denver, Aurora, Inglewood, and Fort Collins. They have the strength and power to win your case. More than 30 lawyers and 100 staff members. They help with all kinds of injury cases, Megan. If you weren't at fault, car accidents, motorcycles, ride shares, pedestrians, trucks, even if you were injured at work and it wasn't your fault, Backus and Schenker has your back. Call 222-2222 to see if you have a case. Like I said, they don't charge you a thing until they win for you. 222-2222. Become one of the families that Backus and Schenker has won over $1 billion for here in Colorado. Also brought to you guys by our great friends down at Breckenridge Brewery. Farmhouse is open. If you can catch it not raining, Megan, I highly recommend going down there. They have a great outdoor seating area. Obviously, all of the Breck brews are there on tap. You can try them all. They have a storefront there at the very front where you can buy them all by the pack, by the case, whatever you want. They've got the Palisade Peach, Strawberry Sky. Why am I blanking on the beach? Mountain Beach. Thank you. So the Mountain Beach, I had never tried it because it's a little bit darker than like what I normally drink. I really liked it. I really liked it. Got a nice cold can. I really liked it. Mountain Beach is another great one they've got going this summer. Again, it's still raining every day, but it's hot. Like, it's really hot. Then it rains, and then it's really hot again. So it's a perfect time of year to crack an ice cold Breck brew. Use the Breck beer locator at breckbrew.com to find a location near you that is selling all of your favorite brews, now available in all 50 of the United States. Again, breckbrew.com. Use the Breck beer locator. Last but not least, we are brought to you guys by our great friends down the street at Illegal Pete's. Locations in Colorado and Arizona, including one just a couple blocks from the DNVR bar. The longest happy hour in town goes until 8 o'clock, Monday through Friday. I talk about it every week, Megan. I just saw another one. One of my favorite restaurants that's real close to my house. Like, hey, join us for happy hour, 6 o'clock. It's like, cool, we'll sprint over there when we get home from work.
But that's a tough happy hour to catch.
That's a tough happy hour to catch. Not at Illegal Pete's, not the case. It's going till 6. Their margaritas are great. The burritos are great. Stop by there, get a margarita, get a burrito before you come on down to the DNVR bar for the Women's World Cup game tonight. Then you can have more drinks, more food, all of that good stuff. And then head back to Illegal Pete's after because they're open late. So you can do it all over there at Illegal Pete's. Great friends of DNVR, and we're very lucky to have one right down the street. All right, Megan. Well, we have a few questions lined up, but let's get into this Ben Meyeres. There's not really a ton to get into. I think the biggest thing is what Avery is pointing out right here in the chat. Just a shade over $2 million left in space. That is a big deal given where the Avs are at cap-wise. We talked yesterday, Yumi and Rudo, about do they add someone in this last spot? Are they going to have the room to? Staying north of $2 million is going to give them an opportunity to pick up an impact-ish type guy.
It feels that way. And interestingly, on the heels of Kovalenko being an option later in the season for the Avs, seeing that there is a hole in their forward group to fill around that third line, and now knowing Ben Meyeres is coming back for what I believe is less than his qualifying offer, is interesting. Because if it had been around what I thought his qualifying offer was, it was just above 800 something. And it makes the smallest bit of difference, but now they're just above $2 million in available cap space. And I think that can make a difference in terms of the type of return that kind of money could elicit.
Well, and then you look at, we talk so much about the margins, with these contracts and stuff. And I think, probably with the exception of Ross Colton and his camp, everyone thought the Ross Colton deal was just a shade too high. Just a shade. He could grow into it and it could end up aging very, very nicely.
Is it Sebastian Aho high, right, or is it Ross Colton high? Because now I'm feeling like really differently proportionately on the high of these two.
Right. But now you look at Ben Meyeres, where I really did, Megan. I thought he was going to come in $950. Well, you shave $200K off that. That helps offset a little bit of what feels like maybe, right now in July, a teeny bit of an overpayment for Ross Colton. This is the type of stuff we talk so much about. The Avs make smart moves. This front office makes smart moves. This is another example of it. Saving just that little bit of money to keep them above $2 million and leave themselves some wiggle room here. You could have really handicapped yourself had this gone a little bit higher and suddenly you're under $2 million. And there's just something about that demarcation line, being able to stay north of that, I think is a big win for them.
Absolutely. It could bring about the Zach Aston Reeses of the world.
Absolutely. And again, we talked about it yesterday. I do think the Patrick Kanes, the Vlad Tarasenko's, those guys are probably not taking. Look, if the Habs get one of those guys for $2 million, give Chris McFarland GM of the year right now, regardless, because he pulled some weird, dropped something in their drink and got them to agree to a deal way less than that. Well, I was going to say truth serum, but I was like, no, that's the exact opposite of what they would have done. But
immediately regretting everything Jeffrey said.
Yeah, no. Point being, those guys, you're probably not talking them anymore, but you are right. There is that next tier player that this keeps you very competitive on that market if you want to still pursue those types of players and not wait till after the season starts to try to address it via trade or whatever. This leaves them plenty of wiggle room.
Definitely.
Anything else on Ben Meyeres? I mean, we made the mention yesterday. I personally don't think he's one of the guys that can talk about not getting opportunity. They gave him a lot of reps. I thought he grew. He was better at the end of the year. He needs to take another step this year, given the commitment the Avs made to him in terms of come here because we think you can be an impact guy on this team.
Well, and there's something about the 1 year of this contract that stands out to me as the ultimate. You have to prove yourself within this season to make a case for why that opportunity moving forward would be granted to you and why more money down the line would be granted to you. And it's Ben Meyeres taking, it's not even that he had an option, but he's having to believe in himself in this year to demonstrate that this was the right destination for him, because I'm sure there are other teams still interested in him at the end of this contract. But if he wants to remain a member of the Colorado Avalanche, there's a lot riding on his own shoulders this year.
He came here because they told him, we're going to give you opportunity. I feel like they have. I think they will this year as well. It's up to him to seize that opportunity a bit. and make the most of it. I don't necessarily look at this as him betting on himself because he didn't really have a ton of leverage. But I think the point you just made, I don't remember exactly how you said it, but like, this is kind of your show me year. There's teams that are going to be interested in you. The Avs are going to still be interested in you. Go out, have an impact, and you will get a much, much, much bigger raise next year.
Definitely.
Let's get to just a couple of these questions. Again, thank you guys so much. Whenever we put out the call for questions, you guys
They were good ones.
come through in droves. There were some good ones here. Can you even tell me? Did get official confirmation it is 775 on Ben Meyeres. Can you read that handle? I don't want to like butcher this. Question is, any worries about Manson after a rough year of injuries at Smirabito MTG? I don't know what that is. Are you worried about Josh Manson at all?
A little bit, if I'm being honest.
There's got to be concern because he's had the injury issues in the past, right?
And because now there's context, but because he thought he had made this turning point in his rehabilitation to return for the playoffs. Now, some of that is the incentive of returning to the playoffs, but it was presented as if there was belief that he was, in a good spot to return. Now, understanding that players like Cale Makar weren't even at 100% and still playing, my hope is that this offseason will address what needs to be addressed. But the concern comes from how Manson described this injury and the rehabilitation process around the end of the year point when we learned he'd be coming back, not at the regular season, but right at the start of playoffs, basically. He had talked about the difficulties of the rehabilitation process being something related to the nature of the injury, just like kind of requiring some time. It wasn't like something had gone wrong in the rehabilitation. It just felt like it was something tricky about the nature of the injury. And because there is some amount of that is just completely out of his hands, that makes me a little bit nervous.
Yeah. I think he's such a good fit here. I think really what he does well, what the Avs have gotten out of him, I think it works really well. You want to see him be able to have that bounce back year and stay healthy, and I think that's going to be a lot of it. A little bit of concern, I think, until he can show that he can stay healthy.
Yeah.
Is that fair? Right?
No, it is, because he made a return only to exit the lineup again because things were not where they needed to be, and that was earlier in the season. And so I think fear is not unfounded, but thankfully there's been a lot more off-season for him to recover
100%.
and focus on that completely.
Absolutely. From @Brooke_Elise, with the amount of change in this season's lineup, how long do you expect for it to take for the team to be settled in? How far into the season would it take for you to be concerned if they aren't meeting expectations? I think a lot of the changes kind of come around the fringe, as were last season. You had deep cuts to the core of this group: Andre Burakovsky, Nazem Kadri, and then what ended up being Gabe Landeskog. This year, I think you are going in with that core intact, and you've just made fringe moves. So I don't expect for there to be as much of a transition period this year as maybe we saw last year.
Are you thinking like 20 game mark being where you're really starting to decide how you feel about the team later than that?
I mean, decide how I feel about the team is probably later than that. But to me, I think the way that they put this group together, you should start to see them, come to form pretty quickly. I personally think quicker than 20 games.
Okay.
Because again, your changes are around the fringe, and they're in your bottom six, and these are lines that you're putting together for a specific reason, because these lines will play, these players should complement each other, et cetera, et cetera. You're not having to replace, like I said, Nazem Kadri, Andre Burakovsky, Gabe Landeskog. That, I think, was, you were asking players to take big steps and fill big roles. Last year, as we're this year, it's like, hey, come be Darren Helm. And that's a little bit more palatable for a new guy coming in.
That makes a lot of sense. I think because of the uncertainty I have for Jonathan Drouin, I'm putting 20 games as my mile marker because of his utilization. Like, he might assume a top six role immediately and just stay there. But if for some reason that doesn't pan out, that's why I'm looking to the full 20 games there roughly to see what they might do to pivot around that if Duran's not ready to assume a top 6 role immediately.
Yeah. No, it's a good call. At Cujo429, with Kovalenko signing, I think the Avs can be patient in looking for a fill-in piece in the meantime. And history has shown that early in the season they are willing to do call-ups. Is a third line of Wood, Colton, Foudy an option? At least get a look at it in training camp. That seems a little too rich for my blood to come out of the gate with JL Foudy on your third line unless he's taken a significant step this summer.
It reminds me of what they did with Sampo Ranta in giving him, 10 games through the start of the season? Or was it more than that?
I think it was 9.
9 games.
Yep,
okay.
Technically.
Or
maybe it was 10.
I think
Doesn't matter.
It
was 9.
If they give it the Sampo Ranta treatment, I'm okay. Well, as long as it's not coming at the expense of another opportunity. And now that we know they have a $2 million burning hole in their pocket, Foudy makes a little less sense. But they're absolutely going to give it a look in training camp, preseason games, which is where I think we'll really get an example of that. I don't know. Had
their cap number come in after the Ben Meyeres thing around 1.7, then I would have been like, I don't know about third line, but I think there's a chance you see him there. Again, with $2 million to play, to your point.
Now there's less reason to do it.
Right, exactly. That's a great way of putting it.
They gave Ranta in last year 6 games.
And then
the year before, they gave him 10.
It was 10. All right, good call.
Right off the bat, kind of fun, kind of scary.
It was fun until he was bad those last 3 games.
Yeah.
Then it was like, okay.
All right. That's where I'm like, do it for Foudy, but I also don't want him to meet the same fate as Sampo Ranta.
Because he had a real nice start to the season last year, and then when Foudy first got called up, he just kind of disappeared a little bit there. I would be excited. Again, I mentioned it just the other day. Chris McFarland called out Jean-Luc Foudy as someone that they are eyeing to take a significant step this year. So, I mean, if you're telling me it has to be an Eagle on that third line, I think he's in the consideration. I think the way you just put it, it makes a lot less sense now that they have $2 million they can spend. We'll do just a couple more here. And I want to do this one because I honestly just kind of disagree. From a good follower, good friend of the pod, the team here, everything. East Coast Avs champ. He's always been in on our stuff going back to the BSN days. What are some realistic expectations for Cale coming into the season? How do you think he bounces back from a tough injury season to get back to being the McDavid of the blue line? I thought even with the injuries, he was... I think the only reason he didn't win the Norris Trophy was because he didn't play enough games.
I think I understand the question too. It's like the expectation is the same as it was before last season. Even in spite of what happened last season with injury, it is still exactly there, with the option for him to exceed expectation as he seems to do year by year in my eyes. To still be a Norris finalist at the end of an injury-riddled season is not just a reflection of who he is, but also how the league views him.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
They take him seriously. They view him as that same threat, even though he misses some games. I still feel that way about Cale Makar too, and I'm excited to be surprised by him year by year because he always does seem to get better in ways that I didn't imagine. And the leadership component is where there's heightened expectation for him to assume an even bigger role. He's completely ready for it. He has such a good head on his shoulders, and the way he approaches the game, post-game, I think is so helpful, not only to himself, but to his teammates. That's the kind of voice that I want to be in the room.
He's always willing to stand in and answer questions and take accountability and all of that. But it was interesting last year because not only did he have the injuries, but I really do think his usage really wore him down at a certain time. He was having to change his game to be able to play as many minutes as he was. And then there was Jared Bednar went to 7 and 11 for one game, and Cale Makar just took off. He is still that. He's that tier defenseman. He's alone by himself at the top.
A great point, actually, about load management. If Cale Makar can have a little bit more room to just be Cale Makar and not the guy who is out there on every situation and playing extreme minutes every night. He led the team.
He led the league.
The league in time on ice all season. It was tough. It took a physical toll on his body in ways that we saw. So I'm hoping too that that's a little more balanced going into this year.
Yeah, no, and you hope and you think it should be. Some injuries should hopefully, some injury luck would hopefully
Josh
help that
Manson
out.
will actually
exactly
have a big impact on that.
Last one here. Last one from @SpeedLimit93. Who's the funniest hockey player you've interviewed? Honestly, my funniest might be Pavel Francouz.
Aw, I love that. He's the most delightful.
Right. Well, he's just always like, I remember during the Western Conference Final, he had the shutout, and then he had a game the Avs won, I believe, 6-5. And in between the Western Conference Final and the Stanley Cup Final, our buddy D-Mac asked him, and I understood what D-Mac was trying to ask him, talking about like fundamentally, how do you prepare? But he asked him, Pavel, what's the difference for a goalie in a game where you have a shutout versus one that you give up 5 goals? What's the difference for you? And Pavel Francouz sits there and he goes, 5 goals? And he was just like, he wholeheartedly just meant it. And I thought it was so damn funny. And he's got that sense of humor where it's like, he's not standing up in his stall like cracking jokes, but she's like, I'll tell you whatever I think. And sometimes it's pretty damn funny. I
love that. I had a few people that came to mind.
Nice.
And I think you can endorse this one because I think you actually witnessed this. But one is Devon Toews, but not to interview. It is because he is mischievous and meddles in interviews. You were there, I think, for the time he was using his sandal as a microphone.
Yep.
But one time I was interviewing Josh Manson, and he was fully throwing elbows and giving Manson a hard time throughout the entirety of the interview. And so Toews is a bit of a menace, and he's mischievous in a very funny way that I think was worth calling out.
So there's 2 players that come to my mind. So AJ adds Nick Holden on here. I never got to talk to Nick Holden. He left before I officially got in the room, but AJ puts that in all caps. That seemed like a pretty immediate added. But here's one thing I'll say about 2 players. You just mentioned Devon Toews and how he messed with everyone else. You know who else did that? JT Compher. JT Compher was, that was his whole thing. If you were within 5 stalls in either direction and you were getting an interview, JT Compher gets in on it. Both those guys are rough interviews, though, themselves. Devon Toews, I get it. You can just tell there's a lot of days where he seems like he's like, I don't want to answer these dumb questions. JT Compher was always someone that frustrated the hell out of me because you'd interview Tyson Jost, and the whole time JT Compher's cracking jokes, throwing things at him. He would like take his stick and like try to knock his hat off while we were talking. You go, oh, so JT, what do you think? Yeah, I don't know. We played really well. It was fun. And it's like, what the hell just happened? You were chuckles over here for the last 5 minutes. I turned my microphone towards you and you got nothing to say. So it is funny that both those guys, I'm with you. They like to mess with everyone else, but when you go to interview them, they're like all business.
Bo can be funny.
Bo can be funny.
Bo is another one that can be mischievous too.
Yep.
And then the other is Jean-Luc Foudy, but you wouldn't know it because of your interviews with him. But I've never felt more lied to by you than when Jean-Luc Foudy got called up to the NHL. You were like, oh my gosh, so funny, such a great interview. It's not even intentionally funny. He's bullying you.
I'm really excited. I was like, okay, never mind.
And I feel like he would hate to know that I'm talking about how funny I found this to be. But there was one interview last year where I asked him a couple questions. And the first one, he said, that's a violation. I won't answer that. And the second, I'm looking at Kevin McGlue, like, what was wrong with this question? He's like, it's too personal. And he was like, do you have any goals for the upcoming season?
Oh.
And then I asked something else in the same vein, different question. He said, that's a violation. And he wouldn't answer any of my questions. So I asked like maybe 2 more, and I ended the interview. And he walks away and he goes, that's going to be a sick article. Because I could barely ask him anything. And then Kevin McGlue says, she just talked to Cronin for 30 minutes. And he goes, and he leaves. And he's hilarious like that. The last game of the year for Eagles for me, he yelled out as he was leaving, tweeted out angrily, because he knows that I usually tweet about things that they're doing. And so there's absolutely this funny side of him.
I've never seen it.
Wouldn't know otherwise because he becomes very.
I confronted Megan in the locker room. I was like, "You set me up." I was like, "You said he was a great interview on purpose." So I'd go over there and talk to him.
He's a bad interview.
Okay, all right.
Because he doesn't want to answer any of your questions.
And like I said, I couldn't hear him.
No,
he's like, who's Georgiev? He's another one that you got to put your microphone in his mouth to hear him.
We speak the same language.
Yeah.
I just see a lot of myself in Georgiev. Really soft-spoken, patient.
Yeah, those two are definitely I've seen people just walk away from Georgiev scrums. They're like, I'm not close enough.
Megan's just like, he's the greatest person on this world.
Well, he's a great guy, and like he's always got something interesting to say. If you can hear him.
You're right. He is very soft-spoken.
He's just,
you have to be lucky in your positioning in the scrum just to hear.
He's one of those guys that his helmet popped off in a game last year, and it was even weird to see him like on the ice because we've gotten to know him as the very soft-spoken. The goalies sit at one end, especially on game days. They don't talk. People don't talk to them. They're very to themselves. So it was like almost weird to see him in that competitor environment. Because I'm like, I can't imagine you raising your voice above like 4 decibels.
Remember when he wanted to fight Binnington?
I do remember that.
That was so out of character.
See, and again, it was stuff like that where like when you get to know these guys a little bit, you talk to them and it's like, what? And who was it? Francouz last year, it was a player, was like telling him like, come on. And I was like, Pavel Francouz. Oh my gosh.
No way.
That's how much Binnington sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, you brought out the worst
of Alexander Georgiev. That's how you know.
Best.
Right. Cool. I think that's about it. Got some breaking news during the show. Talked about Bergeron. It was a good Wednesday, Megan.
I thought it was really good.
I don't think it's raining anymore. It was raining when I walked in, but it is what it is. You, Rudo, AJ tomorrow, and then we've got a Rudo and AJ show on Friday. So it's all good vibes right now, Megan. It's just all good vibes as we head into August next week.
Wow.
The true heart of the off season, just brutal. Nothing to talk about. We'll be reaching deep into our bag of tricks for content for August.
Snake
Excuse me.
draft season.
But they keep giving us little kernels, right? Kovalenko. Ben Meyeres.
Spaced out enough that we've gotten some runway out of this too. Yeah.
Okay, this is actually going really well.
It's Rudo and I were talking about that yesterday right before you got there. We're like honestly, the fact that I don't know what AJ and Rudo have planned for Free Skate Friday. Those shows can always, we can always get those a little off the rails. But we have a chance here, Megan, to make it to August without having to do bullshit.
I want to push it to that, too.
Right.
I want to see how far we can take this.
It's been impressive. I've been proud of our team here. For Meghan Angley, we got y'all here on the board today, making sure you guys can see us and hear us. I'm Jesse Montano. Thanks so much for listening. We'll talk to you guys soon.